the nature, structure, content, aims and objectives of research degrees such as MPhil and PhD degrees make the pursuit of these degrees a tough undertaking. As a result, research students face several issues and problems, including mental health problems during their studies. So in this brief presentation, we will discuss the main mental health problems that research students might face, the causes of those problems, and what could be some of the strategies that students and educational institutions can adopt to deal with the mental health problems of research students. So first, some of the mental health problems of research students include, for instance, imposter syndrome. This actually is a kind of feeling or perception of the research students that they do not deserve to be enrolled in such high stake or high value research programs such as MPhil and PhD research programs. Secondly, isolation. Because generally MPhil and PhD studies are long-term studies, and these need persistent studying and research, often in isolation. And so these journeys are often lonely journeys, and as a result, there is this persistent feeling of isolation on the part of research students. So this could be another problem that can lead to mental health issues. As a result, there is persistent stress that leads to anxiety and also, in many cases, to depression. It has been reported that a substantial percentage of research students, more than 50%, often face mental health problems. Besides anxiety, depression, and stress, the other feeling that research students might have is the fear of failure. And again, because this is a high-stake these are high-stakes programs, academic and research programs, failure at the end is something that can lead to mental health issues. Because if you are involved in a program for 2 or 3 or 4 years, or in many cases more than this duration, and at the end there is this apprehension on the part of the research students that they can still fail to get qualified, that can lead to fear of failure. And so if there is persistent fear of failure, that can result in mental health problems. Then guilt feeling is often, again, because there is a good deal of investment in terms of time, in terms of resources, mental, physical, and economic resources. And so there is often a persistent feeling of guilt in terms of the return as a result of this huge amount of investment. And so if there is fear that this investment will not essentially lead to success, that can result in the feeling of guilt on the part of the research students. Now, the main causes of the mental health problems among research students could generally be divided into 2 categories: the internal or personal problems and the external or environmental problems. The internal personal problems might include problems related to the academic abilities and skills of the research students. In many cases, the research students who have got enrolled in research studies have the academic qualification on paper, but they lack the essential academic skills and the kind of knowledge that they need to have at this stage. So that can then lead to kind of failure, academic failure, and that can then lead to mental health problems. Similarly, aptitudinal problem, which actually means that generally in terms of in academic terms and in professional terms, people need to have certain aptitudes for certain types of academic fields and professional fields as well. So if PhD students are enrolled, or research students in general are enrolled in research programs, or if they are conducting research in certain areas that are not suited to their choices, to their mental abilities, or to their interests, that can lead to mental health problems, because there is this feeling that they do not fit in the kind of programs in which they have been enrolled. Then disciplinary issues. By this, what I mean is that the PhD, the research studies are often serious undertaking, and they need long-term commitment. They need the research students to have discipline to apply themselves in line with the requirements and the kind of situation that they are, academic and research environment in which they are working. So they need to be disciplined in terms of their time, in terms of regularity, in terms of punctuality, in terms of rigor that is requirement on their part in order to produce quality research, in terms of authenticity, in terms of ethical considerations. They need to be disciplined. So lack of discipline on the part of research students might then lead to their perceived failure, and then that they can actually result in mental health problems. The external or environmental factors include institutional factors, which actually means perhaps lack of institutional support, lack of facilities at the institution where they're conducting research, the overall institutional environment, whether it's conducive or not. If it's not conducive to the kind of research the research students are conducting, that can lead to failure and frustration, and as a result to mental health problems. Then the role of the supervisor or supervisors is very important. In many cases, the supervisor is not just an academic or research mentor. They also need to continuously provide psychological support to the research students. They need to continuously encourage them to keep on track, to work harder, to be positive. So if that kind of support is not coming from the supervisor, if the supervisor or supervisors are not providing or they're not in a position to provide academic support or social and mental support, that can lead to mental health problems among the students. And then the socio-economic problems, which again in many cases is beyond the capacity of the students. So if they have socio-economic problems, if there are problems, for example, problems in their families or in their societies, if they are facing economic problems, and most often because the research programs generally, but especially PhD programs, need long-term investment, and often PhD students need to relinquish their jobs in order to focus on their academics. So that can lead to economic hardships on the part of the research students. If there is no economic support available, institutional support or governmental support, or if they do not have any scholarships or funding for their studies, that can lead to their economic burdening and as a result to mental health problems. Now, what are the general consequences of mental health problems among research students? So these consequences could be categorized into psychological consequences and physiological consequences, academic consequences, and socioeconomic consequences. Psychological consequences for students might include feelings of isolation or loneliness, and persistent tensions, anxiety, and depression. And in many cases, this can lead to suicidal thoughts on the part of the research students. Then the feeling of inadequacy could also be one of the consequences of mental health problems. And so there are several consequences, psychological consequences of the mental health problems that students face. Then physiological, which actually means physical health related issues. These could, the psychological problems, persistent mental health problems could lead to physical health issues, such as, for example, physical ailments, including loss of weight, and similarly loss of appetite, sleeplessness. Again, that can have physical consequences. Similarly, they could have other physical ailments that can then further aid to their mental health problems. Then socioeconomic problems. So again, as I said previously, the PhD or research studies are long-term commitments. They need long-term investment in terms of economy as well as these have social costs, such as isolation from families or relinquishing responsibilities related to families. So those could be some of the other consequences of the mental health problems. And then academic. Persistent mental health problems will ultimately have an impact on the academic achievement of the students in their adequacy in terms of producing good results or in terms of paying persistent attention to their studies that could lead to then their poor performance academically and ultimately to their dropout from the research programs. And lastly, we might think of some of the ways in which research students' mental health problems could be dealt with, or in other words, some of the remedies. So the first thing is that in most cases, research studies end in failure because of lack of discipline on the part of the student. So what they need to do is that they need to be disciplined right from the beginning of the study towards the end of it. They need to properly plan. They need to properly select the topic. They need discipline in terms of their focus on the study. They need to manage their time and their resources. They need to manage relationships with their supervisor and other support. And so they need to follow the rules and regulations of the institutions in which they are studying. Then secondly, interest. So the research students need to not only select a topic or topics of their interest, but also to continuously develop their interest by studying and enhancing their knowledge and skills in the particular field. losing interest is one of the biggest problems that can lead to abandoning the research studies. Supervisory support is very important, so there should be generally awareness on the institutional level, on the level of the supervisors, and also on the level of the student, that it is very important that they have the support of the supervisors, the guidance and the supervision of the supervisors is very important in order to have a good mental health on the part of the students. Then counseling. In many cases, when one has feelings of isolation or frustration, there is generally need for counseling. This counseling could be informal, such as with friends or senior colleagues, and this could be formal, in which case they might need to consult their supervisors and the psychological support system that might be available in their universities or institutions. So this is something that is very important. Specialized care. In many cases, if there are significantly high mental health issues, in that case they might need specialized care, such as perhaps the support or the advice of psychologist or psychiatrist. So there should be access to specialized care in those cases. Institutional support is very important. Institutional support in terms of the various types of problems that can affect the mental health of students is very important. So there should be this awareness on the part of the institutions that that the research students need institutional support. Social support is very important. So generally, one needs to one needs not to actually abandon their social life, such as their relationship with their friends or their families is very important. Their colleagues in the workplace, and similarly, support even from their supervisors could be considered outside the academia, could be considered as social support, and so that is very important. Openness. In many cases, research students find it difficult to share their difficulties with others, but it is very important that they need to be aware that in many cases they need to be open about their problems, to share their problems with other, perhaps senior colleagues, with their supervisors, with their family members, and in many cases this might be a very good thing in terms of dealing with their mental health problems. And lastly, collaboration is again very important. Collaboration with other colleagues, collaboration with their supervisors, and collaborations with their batchmates or classmates in terms of discussing their issues and problems, in terms of discussing the difficulties that they face in academic terms, in their, for example, in their research questions, or in terms of responding to their research objectives or research design. So also in terms of asking other people, other colleagues, other batchmates in the research programs, what they do with their mental health issues, that can also be very helpful in terms of having an understanding and insight into the mental health problems, and in terms of dealing with those adequately.